r/askreddit. Sailors of Reddit, what's the most unusual thing you've experienced while at sea? My area occasionally gets phytoplankton blooms. If you're boating at night and sail into a bloom, the wake of your boat will suddenly start glowing blue.
https://www.ocregister.com/wp-content/upload/2021/03/ocr-l-neon waves tips-034-07-1.jpg $W=620. It's pretty darn bright, easily seen with the naked eye, and appears out of nowhere. 1 minute you're sailing in complete darkness, the next you're in glowing water. We were sailing, 330 feet ship, from the North Sea to West Africa. I was off ship and sleeping. I woke up and for some reason decided to go up to the bridge, which is something I usually never did when I could be sleeping or eating. It was night, so all the lights were off on the bridge save for a few red ones, and I noticed how bright it was outside. I went over to starboard and the fucking white cliffs of Dover were completely illuminated by a full moon. Just beaming moonlight. It was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Of course the mate on duty was English and was nonchalantly like, "Yeah, that's Dover. This one isn't me, but a Welsh guy I met in the Caribbean. He had done a few transatlantic trips in a small sailboat, so had tons of ocean experience. A big storm caught him, with huge rolling waves. He decided to heave to ride it out, basically using your sail and the rudder to put the brakes on and give yourself a smoother ride. He was in the cockpit and was riding up one of the bigger waves. The next part is wild. He swears to God on his grandmother's grave that a giant whale just below the surface cruised up the wave beside him and just stared straight at him. He describes looking into this animal's huge eyeball, just looking back at him, for what was probably a couple seconds, but he said felt like minutes, from a few feet away. He's never lied or really even exaggerated otherwise, so I believe him. Can you imagine seeing that? Sometimes I really miss being at sea. When the water is dead flat, and the sky is clear, at night, it's really possible to get completely disoriented and fall in. You can't tell where the water begins and the sky ends, so you always keep your hand on the lifeline. Was sailing off the coast of the big island Hawaii in February. We were mostly interested in fishing since the wind had died down. There were no other boats around that were visible and it was a very calm and peaceful day. Now often you'll see humpback whales breaching in Feb and you can also hear them singing if you are underwater. That is cool enough, but this encounter was awesome. I was baiting a hook, and suddenly on the starboard side of the boat a pod of about 20 melonhead whales, https://us.whales.org/whales-dolphin/species-guide/melon-headed-whale, comes up right beside the boat and they just start staring us down. I lean over and this one dude moves a little closer and just keeps moving his head so he can eye me up and down. They all just kept staring at us with an expression of WTF are these? Who interesting, don't look like they can swim at all. They eyed us at close quarters for about 5 minutes and then just took off. The weirdest part of the encounter was the close eye contact I had with the first whale was definitely two individuals sizing each other up. Best part of the whole day. Volunteering to help search for survivors when the Swiss airplane crash of '98. Grim shit, still gives me nightmares. Lots of crazy little things, but I was on a ship that lost a man overboard in the Atlantic. Reports were that a lifesaver was thrown immediately after he fell in. The lookout said he saw a swell overtake him as he was going toward the lifesaver, and that was it. We searched for hours, never seeing a single sign. Searchlights in the water. Dark shape swimming past them. Makes you realize how small we are in nature. Still think about it to this day. I can't recall seeing anything really unusual aside from wildlife and natural phenomenon. Passing through an area off Brazil, we saw a huge number of dolphins, whales and sea airds feeding on what must have been massive shoals of fish. Plus I did get to see the most magnificent sunrises and sunsets, spectacular, clear moonlit nights, the aurora, Arctic ice, penguins in southern Argentina, albatrosses, polar bears. Throw in a couple of trips through Suez and Panama canals too. Picking up a small, 28, sailboat in Egg Harbor, New Jersey, delivering to Havre de Grace, MD. We get out into the ocean. Intercoastal waterway is in the ocean down most of the coast of New Jersey. Wind dies dead and night is falling.
We motored all the way to Cape May in the dark and actually had to veer to port twice because we were going so perfect by the charts we would have hit 2 buoys. Hit Cape May after the sun came up, but the fog was so thick we had to anchor for a couple hours because the entrance there is narrow and hazardous, can't risk it in someone else's boat. While anchored we hear this loud motor approaching us, but visibility is maybe 30 or 40 feet. We start blaring an air horn every 15 seconds. Suddenly this cruiser, probably 40, comes through the fog right at us. Must be going 15 or 20 knots. He pulled up and veered around us with maybe 5 to spare. Scared the crap out of us. Got into Delaware Bay and finally a good tailwind and we're off. Then we look back and the wind is the leading edge of a strong squall, heavy rain, lightning, and thunder. Water gets choppy as hell. We're probably listing over 20 degrees in this wind. Made it to the entrance to the C&D canal just as the rain caught us. Wind is too strong to sail through the canal, so back to motoring. Motored all the way to the Susquehanna Flats, but it's getting dark. The channel through the flats is maybe 20 wide and weaves through 2 of water all around, no lighted channel markers, so drop anchor again till dawn. What should have been a 3-day trip with an overnight in Cape May became a 5-day trip. French Navy navigator here. Back in 2018, went underway from Toulon on the high sea patrol ship Commandant Tucuing for a routine patrol. The sea was very rough out of the roadstead, coming from the west, which was completely contradictory with what our weather briefs were indicating. Captain decided to go ahead nonetheless. We took a heading towards the east to enter Hyers Bay. When we entered in the pass, shit went down. I was outside, starboard wing of the bridge to take bearings when the ship took a 35 degrees list on starboard. If I had held my arm out, it would have been underwater. I held on the compass for dear life, because going overboard in that weather would have probably meant death. Needless to say, I shat myself. When the ship leveled, my boss went out to check if I was still there, and ordered me to go below to check how bad the damage was to some of our gear. I went, and when I was at the main deck, the ship took a 43 degrees list to starboard. I was then blessed with the horrific sight of a washing machine that was strapped in a room by the hull on port side punch a hole through the bulkhead and go straight to starboard without touching the deck. Also, a lot of the firefighting equipment, axes, hoses, pumps, was just flying all over the place, with guys from the security department desperately trying to catch it and fasten it. At that point, we had entered the bay and had better weather. We had lost electricity in the bridge and CIC, so the captain decided to wait in the bay for the weather to calm down. When it did the next day, we pulled back into port for repairs. This little escapade resulted in 2 guys having broken limbs, the electrical network of the bridge and CIC being badly damaged. The guys that were supposed to strap down shit didn't do it correctly and got punished, and for me, a reminder of my mortality. On a more positive note, I once saw a stork land on out 100mm turret after a sandstorm off Libya, and stay there for several hours. Also, we had a couple of sperm whales with a calf swimming alongside, for almost a day off Ivory Coast. When you see that kind of stuff, it doesn't matter if you are 3 months in or 20 years in. You feel like a kid again. Migrants from Haiti. Literally floating on a makeshift raft constructed of soda bottles and spray foam. Not a sailor but a lifelong surfer, so I've spent plenty of time in and around the ocean. I was camping on the beach in Baja with some friends when I noticed the moon was going to be setting over the ocean in a few hours. The moon that night was just a sliver, almost like a fingernail. We had actually gotten kind of skunked wave-wise that day, and into the night the ocean was almost completely flat. Like a lake flat. No wind as well. Just sheet glass. Not a cloud in the sky. Just when the moon lowered to the horizon, it started to glow bright orange. And just when it hit the edge of the ocean, the reflection shimmered all the way to the sand. It looked as if the moon was floating on the sea for just a few minutes. It was one of the most beautiful sights I have ever seen. Far more beautiful than any sunset. Flying fish timed a wave right and jumped out the water and threw an open hatch directly into the galley. Freeboard was like 7 meters. The chefs shat themselves, haha. Lots of spooky stuff here, so I gonna lighten up the mood. Northwest of Australia, a couple of days away from Dampier. 4 to 8 watch evening time, already dark outside. Slowly the water was becoming green-bluish. You could distinguish the black horizon and the pitch black outline of the ship, but the water was becoming more and more bright with this strange color. When the phenomenon was at its peak, the water was like a huge light was below it. Together with the darkness of a moonless night, the view was unique and magnificent. It seems that it was some kind of bioluminescent bleach. If you search it on Google you can get an idea, but trust me, that night it was much greater. It is usually around a ship's hull as it moves through the waves. But what I'm talking about was for as far as the eye could see. I have heard many stories from older seafarers. One claimed that the ship was at the exact position an earthquake occurred near Japan and the whole ship jumped. Tough to believe this one, but worth mentioning. Another one that the ship passed over the tsunami of 2004 in Indian Ocean and the speed of the ship became zero when it climbed over the wave. Hurricane, typhoon, ship collision, sandstorm, insane fog on a small boat that took 6 HRS to get back to dock vs 45 minutes. Not quite a sailor, but I've been on a cruise in bad weather to the point dishware was sliding off tables. You could feel the slight panic in the air. My brother also once hooked up with a nice barracuda that jumped over the bimini top of the boat. I had no idea they could launch that far. Sailing through a moonless night. The wind has piped up and like Prufrock I begin hearing the mermaids singing each to each. Living in a fishing town in the Mediterranean, so I hear a lot of stories during coffee. Some interesting stuff like us fighter jets flying at really low altitude. But best story is this one really long time ago. So these guys were fishing and in the middle of the night they see something of their radar or whatever. Guy goes out and sees nothing, pitch dark. When they are very near he goes out, shines a floodlight and sees an abandoned ship in front of the boat. They do a stupid thing. They radio their mates who meet them with oxyacetylene etc., and ransack the thing. Then they drag it to port. Looks like in seafinders are keepers and they missed an opportunity to make a lot of money. It stayed anchored in a scrapyard and eventually was sold for metal. Not sure it's unusual. I worked offshore on a drill ship and experienced a couple of different things. The saddest was a shark getting stuck in the moon pool. He ended up dead. Manta rays are fucking fast, a few would just casually swim by and then out of nowhere just shot forward like a torpedo. Once while testing the drilling package we had a call from subsea for a full stop. When we checked the cameras, an octopus was climbing up the drill pipe. I ended up being lucky and having a captain that allowed fishing. Sharks loved coming behind the fish we hooked and took a bite off them. Dolphins play with each other. Whilst having a daily walk around a heli deck I heard a splash and went on full emergency mode looking for someone that fell overboard, then another splash behind me, then another again behind me, eventually noticed them just jumping out of the water playing. Went through the outskirts of a tornado, the eye of the storm was in China and we were going past Taiwan, not through the strait, and still had 30-meter peak-to-peak waves. Not violent, but quite worrisome. This wasn't that far off coast, most would be able to bobble over to shore, but the ballasting system of the drill ship fucked up and sent it swinging wildly side to side. The stability calcs had 12 degrees as the tip over point I believe, we were 1 or 2 from that figure. That's probably the most scared I've been. The first time you see a large sea turtle is kinda strange, they look like floating boulders. But the sea, for as strange as it is an amazing place as well. Seeing a flying fish or looking in the water and seeing fish as far as you can see is incredible. I saw this quote on one of these once: the sea gives and takes in equal measure. Off the coast of South Africa, I worked aboard a cage diving boat. I witnessed many amazing things, but one day a 5+ meter female white shark approached the boat. She simply hung around and observed us, showing no interest in the cage, the chum, or the bait lines. Every time she returned to the surface, my brain would temporarily refuse to accept what I was witnessing due to how enormous she was. Like, that is what? It's so big, Jesus. She was very composed and observant. It was the first time I truly understood that, despite the fact that it is entirely foreign, there is some sort of intelligence operating in that brain. My dad was once a sailor, so here is his story. There was a quite big storm and the waves got really hot. The ship he was on was massive, so there was not much danger. When he woke up together with the rest of the day shift, they could barely stand. He told me that when he got out of bed, he immediately fell back in. He told me much more stories, but this one really stuck because how hard I used to laugh every single time. You should throw a serious tag on this. Not the ocean, but 26 miles offshore in Lake Michigan we found one of those giant floating swim mats rolled up. Pulled up to it, hoped to and tried to get it aboard, but it was so waterlogged it weighed hundreds of pounds, so it'd been out there a while. When I was in the Navy, I served on a ship with a flat earther. I don't know how someone goes to sea and continues to believe that the earth is flat. There's no experience that makes it more clear that the earth is round than sailing the ocean. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=3_tpnsytmw. I was once out on a fishing vessel. It was so cold it froze the flame on my cigarette lighter. Anchored on a boat in Guadalupe, I woke up in the night to go pee and saw jellyfish momentarily glowing all over the bay. They may have been exciting phytoplankton because it was the same color as we had seen before. Just how surreal and beautiful the night sky looks out to sea, no other place on earth I've ever been compares. A bearded dude having sex with a volleyball ball with the red face painted on it. Obligatory not a sailor. Me and some friends booked a yacht for my buddy's bachelor party / our first big vacation as a friend group after college. I can't say that whether this is completely unusual on the ocean, or if it was just me. But anyways, I woke up one night around 4 AM and decided to watch the sun come up, and just enjoy the solitude after being with a bunch of guys partying for the last 8 days. I got out to the sitting area of the main deck, took a couple seconds to just enjoy the silence, and then there was just nothing. Like no sounds whatsoever. Our yacht was completely still, as there were no waves to rock it or even just slap up against the hull. It was eerily silent. So yeah, I tried to stay up there for a while, but eventually it was just unnerving and I went back down to my bunk. Woke back up a few hours later and everything was normal again. Nothing spooky or paranormal obviously, but I've just never seen the world that still before or since. Commercial fishing, I saw a dolphin giving birth with another holding her up, an oil rig being delivered that was so tall, it disappeared in the clouds, and a seemingly empty cargo ship almost ran us over. The nastiest thing I ever saw was a man dressed in a nightgown tied to a bow in a storm for whining. I had also never seen a real tuna fish or Goliath grouper. They're as big as Volkswagens. I'm telling my partner's story. He is an Atlantic Ocean winter fisherman. He says the most unsettling thing that has happened to him was experiencing the doldrums in winter with fog so thick you can barely see the ocean that is just a few feet over the side of the boat. They are in a 40-foot boat, so easily creamed by any tankers out there. Heavy fog rolls over them and everything just stops. No wind. Barely a ripple in the water. And they just sat there watching their radars and whatnot to make sure they weren't in anyone's path and just waited for the fog to lift and the air to keep moving. Another creepy one is a friend had a man overboard. They were able to hook the guy's clothes with a gaff and were dragging him back on board. Remember, this is winter in the Atlantic Ocean, the boat had to turn around to come alongside the man overboard. He had been in the freezing water long enough that he couldn't move limbs. The gaff broke and the man fell back into the water. Due to the water in his coveralls and boots, they say he immediately sunk like a rock. In an almost instant he was gone. Couldn't see him. Couldn't bring his body home to his family. I love all of these stories. Thanks for sharing, smiling face with heart eyes. Great question. Fishing offshore in Florida, dolphin/porpoise are not unusual but usually in schools of 5 or so. One day we came across hundreds and hundreds, in small pods of 5 to 7 but pods everywhere over what would be blocks. Cool as shit. We stopped trolling and just stayed with them briefly. All around our boat, checking us out, which isn't unusual. Everywhere. Going north. Haha, this guy thinks that Reddit users are sailors. /s. See, Merriman's not sure if they're a religious cult or just gay. Error, I lost my left hand during a fight with a shark. Once a weekish. We're on our 50s, I figure we're doing fine. Depends tbh, sometimes 3+ times, other weeks 0. Lucky if it's once a year. My wife and I were trying for a baby, and so pretty much every other day. Now that she's 5 months pregnant, I forgot how to have sex.